day on 4CA. John MacKenzie, 1300 872911.
It was an interesting chat with Robbie Catter. He brought up a very interesting point. What he's fundamentally saying is, yeah, good to see that march the other day at Parliament House, but the fact of the matter is, for a start, they've got a different sort of mix of crises, of challenges in Brisbane from what we've got up here. And fundamentally, he's also saying there are some parameters that we've still got to work within if we're going to find solutions to this nightmare in which we find ourselves. Now, I just mentioned that issue down in Townsville the day before yesterday, those two police officers. I mean to say, when are we going to get some sort of effective action taken against these kids? It's extremely likely they're regular offenders. They've gone out of their way to actually accelerate into that police car, driven deliberately with force and speed, said this police officer, into our police vehicle. And the quote, the sort of deliberate attack on our police officers will not be tolerated. Now, we've heard about zero tolerance for how long? Does it mean anything? It means zero. The police officer making the announcement here in the City Place not that long ago on zero tolerance, and while he's in mid-sentence, somebody comes up behind him and King hits him in the jaw while he's talking about zero tolerance. Now, clearly, there's no respect for the term zero tolerance, and it's not doing any good. Let me go to this article from the Cairns Post yesterday. Shocking figures show 9 out of 10 juveniles commit another offence within 12 months. That's virtually all of them. Straight back into it again. This is after Cleveland Youth Detention Centre. After a sentence there. And to get into Cleveland, you've got to commit some pretty horrendous crimes as a young person. It goes on to say, amid an intense public debate on how to deal with youth crime, the Youth Justice Minister said 328 young people completed a stay in custody at Cleveland in the year 2022. Of those young people, 92%. That's nearly all of them were alleged to have committed another offence 12 months after they were released. We're going up a dry gully with what we're doing. So, once again, and of course down in Cleveland, like we've got with the police force, you can't get police officers putting their hands up anymore. When these kids can just at will drive their stolen car into the police car and put 2 officers in hospital. Now, down there in Cleveland, they're experiencing once again a severe staff shortage. So this is what we're facing. It is just completely out of control. In circumstances like this, obviously some things we can't do. Look at the outcry about detention of these kids, even though we are fed up to the teeth with these magistrates just letting them go straight out the door and around the corner into another stolen car. But there's an outcry about young people facing detention down at the watch house for any period of time, it would seem. So we need to stay in touch with people like Dr Terry Goldsworthy. He's Associate Professor Criminology at Bond University. He knows the existing parameters. Whether or not we can expand those parameters to include something more effective, I don't know, but we'll have to take guidance from someone like Terry. He's with me on the line. Terry Goldsworthy, good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Can you understand, Terry, because you've been doing it for years, the extent of anger in our community up here? There's even talk now of change of government because of the crime rate up here in Cairns and Townsville. It's clearly a higher level of anger than we've seen in a long time. What are your responses to that, and where should we go as a community?
Yeah, look, I'm not surprised that there is a high level of anger in terms of the crime issues we're seeing in the state. They've been developing for some years. I mean, this hasn't occurred overnight. It's probably the last 6-7 years we've seen the seeds of this sown by the current government. So, you know, it is now become a political hot potato, so to say. It is a central issue in terms of where the government is going to be re-elected or not. You know, when we had COVID, crime didn't feature, or we don't have COVID anymore, and crime is front and centre. So I think there's been a vast increase in pressure. We saw the Victims' March last week in Brisbane down here. You know, the Premier's now under pressure in the media. There's talks of leadership change. I wouldn't be at all surprised if there was some change in leadership within the QPS at the top level, because I think something's got to happen to reset the discussion, and one way you would do that would be putting in place a new commissioner.
Let me ask you this. I thought I heard you say the words, the seeds sown by the current government. Was that your terminology?
Yeah, it was, yep.
Specifically, what seeds were sown by this current government to lead to this nightmare?
Yeah, well, what we saw back in, I think it was 2016, we had the removal of breach of bail as an offence for youth offenders. We had the policy of detention as a last resort. And we really went to a offender-centric approach to youth justice. The problem is that when you do that, you end up with what we've got now, where we have a whole cohort of youths, and we call them serious repeat offenders in Queensland, who have a total disregard for the criminal justice system because they don't see any penalties coming out of it. So we're now trying to fix that, and that will be a work that will take years to happen. I mean, this isn't going to happen in 6 months. It'll take 2 to 3 years to fix up what we've created. And that's why I say there'll be an issue at the next election whether this government will survive on the credentials of law and order that they've put in place.
I hate to lump them together, but we're going to run short of time. I know you're busy. Breach of bail, obviously removed, and detention as last resort. Specifically, what impact did those changes have?
Well, it was much more difficult for police to highlight youths that were committing offences on their bail and breaching their conditions. I mean, where you have a simple offence such as breach of bail, it's quite obvious. You can go and look at their criminal history and see how many times they've breached it, etc. It made it much more complicated. Very few juveniles got their bail applications refused, and we know from the data from the Atkinson report that in excess of 50% of those youth offenders on bail go on to re-offend, and 7% of those offenders re-offend in a way that causes death or GBH.
Detention as last resort. This is really, really controversial now. Can you step us through that one?
Well, it is. I mean, there was a real lack of commitment to putting hardcore offenders into detention. It was basically keep every child you can possibly have detention. Now, we put very few children into detention. The Children's Court annual report last year told us only 6% of matters resulted in a child or a youth going to jail. And the problem we're seeing in, the article that you referenced yesterday was, short-term offending, we've got to stop the child from offending. So, that means a bail refusal. If it means they get held in detention pending the matter's been decided, that's fine. We've got to protect the community. Long-term, to stop the long-term offending, we need to rehabilitate these kids, or they're just going to keep offending. And the article you highlighted from yesterday, it just shows how poorly we're doing with that.
Yes.
That these youth offenders go into a detention centre, and there is no rehabilitation happening at all.
Exactly.
That is just inexcusable.
Mind you, there's no staff available, we've just found out today. No surprises there. Like the police force, they can't get recruits. It seems Cleveland can't either because of what's going on. What's the answer there?
Well, it's interesting you talk about the police and staffing there, John, because the Working for Queensland survey came out a couple of weeks ago, and it's diabolical in terms of the police. It shows that as far as the leadership and executive group go, only 29% of police have a positive viewpoint of them.
Yes.
And that is 16-17% lower than other government departments. Even more concerning is the intention to leave. 13% of police said that they want to leave as soon as possible.
Yes.
Another 17% said they want to leave in 12 months. Another 25% said they intended to only work another 1 or 2 years and then leave. So you're looking at almost 50% of that workforce is saying they want to get out.
Yeah.
I've just never seen figures that bad before.
This is appalling. Now, you also you dropped a bit of a bomb a few minutes ago too, saying, listen, the Queensland Police Service at the top level needs a new broom, which fundamentally points the finger at Katarina Carroll.
Well, I mean, the Commissioner's now been in the top job for 3 years. The crime crisis is one thing. We've had a number of other issues, such as the DNA inquiry. We've had the DV inquiry where there's been failing showed. I just, wonder how many poor outcomes the government will put up with before they go, we need a reset. And I mean, if you've only got 29% of your people having faith in the executive leadership group, then there's a problem with the executive leadership group.
Look, I've got to say, Terry Goldsworthy, this discussion today has been illuminating, to say the least. I really appreciate this insight. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
That's the Associate Professor Criminology at Bond University, Dr Terry Goldsworthy.